Hello, this lecture will cover pages 361 to 440 in the Moody and Sasser textbook. The topics are discussing what is the future of Social Security and what is our new definition of retirement, or in other words, is retirement considered to be obsolete as we have known it in our country. If you haven't noticed by now, Social Security is a big topic in this textbook, and it is because Social Security is so very important for older adults. It is the one program that helps to lift elders out of a state of poverty, provides a regular source of income for a person until the day that they die. So it's been one of the most successful federal initiatives that has ever happened in our country. Social Security is a system, however, that is of great topic of conversation because it does affect so many Americans, and it is an extremely expensive part of our country and our spending. Now, Social Security is not a part of the general operating fund of our country. It is a separate Social Security trust fund that is funded through employer and employee contributions. So a percentage of your pay comes out and is put into this trust fund, and then your employer is also paying a matching percentage. So I believe that the number altogether is approximately 12 or 13% of your income, which is funded in part by you and in part by your employer, is paid into the Social Security Trust Fund. So when we talk about the national budget and the spending budget, we are not talking about Social Security. It's an entity in and of itself. But because the Social Security Trust Fund right now is very well funded, there is concern about how durable and how sustainable that trust fund is, as the proportion of workers in our country is decreasing and the proportion of older persons are increasing. At what point, projecting forward, are we going to have a problem with sustaining our current Social Security system? We have a national insecurity around our Social Security system. Nearly 50% of people that were surveyed in a Gallup poll don't believe that there will be funds available to them by the time that they retire. And only 13% of Americans are confident that they're going to have enough money to comfortably retire. So when you combine a lack of insecurity with your own financial future, with a lack of confidence in the Social Security system and the ability for funds to be available, this creates quite a problem for older adults. And the amount of kind of emotional worry that can go along with what's going to happen when I'm no longer working. So there is a lot of conversation about the sustainability of the Social Security program. Page 367, however, does discuss and bring out the fact that our Social Security system is not going broke. But there is agreement that we probably do need to look at making some changes. So some of the scare tactics that we've heard before, that there'll be no money left for me, or if you vote for that party, all of the Social Security funds are going to be depleted. Some of that is just simply propaganda, and it is scare tactics. But that doesn't mean that we don't have to put some attention towards understanding what the future projections of Social Security look like with the decreasing dependency ratio that we talked about in the previous week, and the increase in the number of retirees and the decrease in the number of workers. So this is a topic that has a lot of conversation and controversy around it. People are eligible to begin taking their Social Security benefits at the age of 67. And any financial planner will tell you that the longer that you can continue to earn a paycheck and stave off collecting Social Security, the better off you're going to be, because Social Security was only intended to replace approximately 40% of your income as if you were working. So Social Security was never intended, even from the very beginning, to be the only source of income for retired older adults. But unfortunately, there has been a bit of a misconception in our country that once you retire, you're going to go on to Social Security and be fine. Well, the question really is, are you able to live on only 40% of your income? When you retire, some of your expenses, living expenses, will likely decrease. But some of your expenses could increase, for example, healthcare expenses. When you're younger, unless you are very unfortunate and happen to have a disease or a chronic illness in your life, you're not really putting that much money towards your health care. But as you get older, you are. Medicare, as we know, is the health insurance program provided by the federal government. But that also does not cover 100% of anybody's medical bills. And that's another misconception in our country, is that Medicare is just going to cover everything. Most older adults have to obtain a supplemental insurance policy to go along with the Medicare, so that the 20% that Medicare doesn't pay for, the supplemental insurance will pick that up. So between Medicare and supplemental insurance, most older adults then will have nearly 100% coverage for their medical expenses. But that supplemental insurance comes with a premium. So every month, out of their Social Security, they're having to pay $300 to $400 to $500 a month to obtain that supplemental Medicare insurance. Also, Medicare premiums come out of their Social Security check as well. So their Social Security check is not just free spending money, it's money that is actually being used to fund their health insurance and older adults' health insurance. So it was never intended to be this only source of income. So older adults need to amass and acquire some wealth, and they need to do that in a way that's going to produce some supplemental income for them in addition to Social Security. So a person is eligible for Social Security when they turn 67. There is an author by the name of, in this chapter, that talks about some of the things that should happen. It's reading number 42. That some of the things that should happen to kind of shore up or make some changes in the Social Security system. One of the things that could happen is that our country could increase the payout date. So instead of getting paid out when you turn 67, maybe the payout date is 68 or even 69. And that payout date has been increased over the years. So if we increase it by another year, that provides some financial relief on the Social Security Trust Fund. We could make it a needs-based benefit, so that if you have a higher income, maybe you don't get your full Social Security benefits. If you have a lower income, maybe you get a little bit more. So we could make it a needs-based system. It could also be privatized. And there's some proposals that say maybe the government should invest that money in the stock market so that the trust fund could actually earn more. And there can be more earnings that are happening and funneled back into the fund. But there's a lot of downside to that, because we know what happens to the stock market. We know that the stock market goes up and down and it crashes. And most economists do not believe that investing Social Security funds, or even a portion of them, in the stock market is the fiscally responsible thing to do. There's just too much volatility, and we would not be able to do a lot of projections year to year, or even 5 years and 10 years, about what the performance of the marketplace is going to be, and our ability to project budgets and what the growth of the Social Security Trust Fund would be. There are others that think that perhaps what we need to do is we should privatize in another way, meaning that maybe people should be given the option to buy into Social Security, or take their Social Security, what they would be giving to Social Security, and just take those funds and put them into their own 401k or IRA account. So give people a choice. Go with the government plan, or take that money and invest it elsewhere. Well, the downside to that is that if people don't make wise investments with that money, and they lose that money in the stock market or another type of investment, that would leave them and put more people into a state of poverty. Not everybody's good at investing, and not everybody wants to use an investment advisor to invest their funds for them. So the problem with that scenario is that it would potentially put at risk a person's financial future. So the government investment is considered to actually be the most fiscally responsible, low risk way to secure your financial future in retirement. So not too many people are really in favor of the privatization approach. But there are other things that we could do to the Social Security system. One of the things that we are dealing with now in our country is the fact that when the Social Security system first came about, the benefits were very generous to the early retirees, because as we mentioned in the previous lecture, we had so few beneficiaries, but we had a huge base of workers. So there was a lot of money sitting in that Social Security Trust Fund, and benefits were very rich and very robust. And that was also because we had a lot of older adults that were in pretty bad financial straits back in the 1930s around the Depression, and those that were trying to recover from the Depression. So the benefits were pretty generous. We are actually today kind of paying for that generosity. We overtapped the Social Security Trust Fund in the past, and now we're having to try to figure out a way to kind of make up for that loss. The thing to take away from this is that, as I mentioned earlier, Social Security is not and was never intended to be the only source of income for older adults. There are three main sources of income: Social Security and your retirement pension. So many companies will offer a matching pension, a matching retirement account, or some type of a defined pension plan where you give money to the company and then that company promises you a check every month. And then your own savings account. So those are really the three main sources of income for older adults: their own investments, Social Security, and their retirement account. So you have to have a good plan in all three, or really two of those areas, having a good retirement plan as well as your own savings account. So the concern also is that we know that the number of beneficiaries in our country is going to continue to rise, but the proportion of people contributing to Social Security is going to continue to decline. And while the cost of Social Security in our country remains relatively predictable, most analysts do predict that Medicare will be the bigger factor in our spending in our country. So again, Medicare being the insurance plan, the projections around the health care that older adults are going to need as the baby boomers age is where most of the consternation comes from and most of the concern about our budgetary health in this country is related to health care expenses, not so much Social Security. This was also interesting in your textbook on page 363. In 1960, less than 15% of the federal budget was spent on the older population. But by the 1990s, the proportion had risen to more than 30%. And by 2011, the proportion was 41% for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So we continue to spend a larger proportion of federal funds on older adults. And that relates back to the lecture from last week, week 12, where we talked about this issue of the equity between what we're spending on older adults and what we spend on children. So that's why these issues of Medicare and Social Security are of such great importance to older adults as well as our nation as a whole. Understand, and I think I've already said this, that our system of Social Security is pay as you go. So you're paying in and those funds are being used today. Make sure that you are taking a look at page 379 and reading Saving Social Security, which is by Peter Diamond and Peter Orzog. It's reading number 38. So I want you to take a look at that because they give some suggestions too as to the things that we could do in our country to balance the budget with Social Security. And the other one I wanted you to take a look at was reading number 42. And this is from AARP, the American Association of Retired Persons. So they do some discussion about the pros and cons of the different opportunities that are out there for helping to shore up the funding in our Social Security system. Again, things like delaying the age at which somebody is eligible, increasing payroll taxes, doing means testing, so weighing the benefits for people who don't need them as much against people that are in more need. So that wraps up really the discussion around Social Security. So I want to just move real quickly into the next section, which is Controversy 10, is retirement obsolete? We've talked a little bit about this in past weeks in the class, and how the baby boomers are going to be looking at retirement a little differently than the retirees of 20 and even 30 years ago look at retirement. So how, as a country, should we be thinking about supporting retirement? And Moody and Sasser put out there that there is a great need to reshape our view of retirement. And one of the things that's happening, and one of the things that's forcing this issue, is that companies, employers, are beginning to really feel the strain of the number of people and the number of employees that are leaving their employment. And there are simply not enough workers to replace the people that are retiring. So what companies are perceiving as walking out their door are things like these people who have worked for a company for, say, 35, 40 years. They have contacts outside of the organization, business contacts. They have, say they're in sales, they have their clients all lined up. And when that person retires, that relationship or those relationships are out the door. You have people with leadership skills that are leaving companies, people that know how to get things done, people that know how to lead teams and communicate well are leaving their companies. What's called legacy knowledge, just the ins and outs of the business and how the business runs and operates, and the history of the company, the history around why do we do it this way and not that way. That institutional knowledge is leaving their companies. Functional skills are leaving the company. So skills that are a part of being able to, say, run the machinery in a plant or operate certain things, technical aspects are leaving their companies. And so companies are beginning to really feel the strain around all of these baby boomers that are leaving their employment and are worrying about what are we going to do? How are we going to replace this person who has worked in our company for 40 years? So then you also pair that with baby boomers who are maybe not ready to retire, but maybe they don't want to work full time. So some companies are getting very creative with a phased in retirement, where instead of working one day full time and then the next day you have no more job and you retire, looking at maybe having a step down retirement system where you're able to keep somebody who's 65 on for maybe another 5 years. And maybe that time is spent working on a transition plan and getting people up to speed and those kinds of things. So companies are beginning to think about creative ways to kind of get around this because there is going to be a labor shortage. We already have a labor shortage. And work continues to provide a role for older adults. And having that purpose in life, we've talked about that as well. So Moody and Sasser asked the question, why do we even have retirement? Why do we have this thing called retirement? Why don't we restructure things so that we kind of lose that age differentiation of, oh, you're 65 now, it's time for you to leave your job, so go home and watch golf. Societally, we need to rethink what retirement should mean and what it should look like, and provide opportunities for people who wish to work. Now, not everybody is going to wish to work, and there are factors that motivate people that to take those retirements and to stop working at 65 or 67. Things like health. If somebody falls into bad health, they may not be able to continue to work. Other things like incentive packages. Sometimes companies will offer a retirement package to say, if you leave now, we're going to reduce your pension, but you get to leave a year early. Some companies who find themselves in difficulties with being able to fund their pension plans offer early retirement for people so that they're not collecting as much money. Now, they may be collecting a lower amount for a longer period of time, but when companies do this, they're somewhat banking on the fact that the retiree will accept the lower payment and they won't need it for as long. So sometimes incentive packages can incentivize people to retire early. Peer pressure, family pressures. You know, Dad, why didn't you stop working? You've been working so hard. Take a break. Things like that. So peer pressure from family and friends can motivate people. And then there's obviously people who are I am going to retire the day I turn 65 because I'm done working and I don't want to work anymore. But we have to recognize that that's not going to be everybody, and people may want to continue to work. So how can we help that to be the case? There's a reading, number 44 in this part of the book, and the author asks the question. It's called Prime Time by Mark Freeman, and he puts forth that we are losing our only increasing natural resource. Think about that for a minute. An increasing natural resource. We typically hear about how our natural resources are decreasing, but the wisdom and experience and talents of our older adults are the only thing in our country that is actually increasing. Why don't we harness that and take that and use it for the good of society? He also asks the question about why don't we have more people, more older people doing that, volunteering their knowledge and their wisdom to mentor young people, and to still continue to have meaning and purpose in life. And so it's a two-way street. Society needs to want that from older adults, and older adults need to want to give that to society. So he's asking the question, why don't we rethink how we are set up in society so that we have good opportunities for the young to benefit from the old, and the old to maintain purpose in their life by sharing what they've accomplished and what with the wisdom that they have acquired in their lives. So he challenges us and says that we would be wise to utilize the wisdom and the skill of the elderly. There is a video that is posted in your week 14 and 15, week 13 and 14 folder that talks about the retirement crisis. I want you to be sure that you watch that. And the implications of an underfunded retirement are huge. If we have too many older adults in our country that do not have the resources to safely and securely provide for a retirement years that are not filled with the stress and strain of financial hardship, there are major implications for an underfunded retirement. So these discussions with people really need to be starting right now at your age, and thinking about, it's so hard to think about the future, 40 years from now, when you are going to be facing your own retirement. But let me tell you one thing, it goes fast. I know it looks like a long horizon, but beginning to save now, putting a little bit away, starting to look at investing and earning some money, making some earnings on your income is a very smart idea. Too many people wait until they're in their 50s to begin saving for their retirement, and it's too late. And it's a hard thing to think about doing because many graduates and young people right out of college not making a whole lot of money. But it doesn't take a whole lot of money over time if you put a little bit away. So that's just a little friendly advice. But it is advice that I think is very solid, because I have seen too many people who buy the multiple cars and take the big fancy vacations and grand and glorious homes, and then they can't fund college education for their children, nor have they saved properly for their own retirement. So lots of financial things to consider in life as we move forward in life. So that is the conclusion of this lecture about retirement, and I'm going to take a real quick look to make sure that I have covered everything I wanted to. I think I have, so you know where to find me if you have any questions. Thanks again, and take care. Bye-bye.